All right. So good morning, everyone. My name is Luz Okendo. I'm one of the parent training coordinators with the Family Networks on Disabilities Parent Education Network project. And today we are presenting an overview of IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disability Education Act. And I will start by sharing my screen to keep us all on the same page. All right. All right, so before we begin the presentation, I do want to talk a little bit about FND and who we are. FND is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And so what that means to families is that the service that we provide would always be free of charge. We are grant funded by the U.S. Department of Education, as well as the U.S. Department of Health. And so we are the statewide parent training and information center. And what we do is we provide information, resources, and supports to families of children with disabilities from birth to age 26. Our focus is on the Individuals with Disability Education Act and how parents can be able to understand what this means to their families, to their child, so that they can be their child's best advocate. So we are not attorneys, we're not doctors, we are not mental health professionals. What we do is we provide information, resources, and support. And what makes us unique as well is that the majority of our board members, staff, including myself, we are either a person that identifies as having a disability or a parent caregiver of someone with a disability. So for me, my daughter is 17 years old. She was born with a complex genetic disorder. And so because of her journey, that's how I got this position, and that's how I've been in the field. And so we use our lived experience as well as the research information to support parents to make sure that they have the support that they need to be their child's best advocate. And so this presentation, again, we're going to be talking overview about the Individuals with Disability Education Act. And so I'll start by giving you some statistics here. So 7 million, that's 14% of students in public school receive special education service under the Individuals with Disability Education Act, and we'll be using IDEA as the acronym. All right. So with that said, you may have come today thinking that you are alone or your child is the only one that struggles to learn or achieve success at school. But the data can tell you opposite. You and your family, you are not alone. There are services in place that can help your child, and all of them are protected under the Individuals with Disability Education Act. Again, IDEA, and that's why it's so important to learn about IDEA. So this is our main goal today, to provide you with some basic information about the law and mostly to invite you to keep learning along with us. So from my understanding, this is the first of this series. And so there are going to be additional series coming along to give you more in-depth information on IDEA. There's different components of IDEA, and we'll talk about that. And then as presenters come from FND to present on this series, you'll learn more about the Individuals with Disability Education Act. But it is the law that protects your student with a disability. And again, if your child has an IEP, the IEP is part of this law. And so we'll talk more about that. So as described by the National Center for Learning Disabilities, IDEA is a national federal special education law, and it ensures that public school serves the educational needs of students with disabilities. IDEA requires that school provide special education services to students as it's outlined in their IEP, which stands for Individualized Education Program, Individualized Education Plan. It also provides very specific requirements, and the requirements is to ensure and guarantee that students with disabilities receive a free and appropriate public education. And I always tell parents when I'm educating them to remember that word FAPE, free, appropriate public education, because that's what the purpose of ID is, to ensure that our students are receiving a FAPE in the least restrictive environment. What does least restrictive environment mean? We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. FAPE and LRE are the protected rights of every eligible child in all 50 states and the US territories. So IDEA requires every state to issue regulation that guides the implementation of the federal law within the state. So at a minimum, state regulations must provide all the protections contained in IDEA. So IDEA is federal, the states all create regulations to ensure that IDEA is happening. So to ensure that our students are receiving FAPE in the least restrictive environment. So some states have additional requirements that go beyond the federal law. Many states offer handbooks or guides to help parents understand these state-specific policies and procedures. What's always important to understand is that IDEA is federal. So again, states can create regulations, but at a minimum, they have to align with federal statute. So there's 4 parts of IDA. Part A is the general provisions. And what that means is the purpose of IDA, and it defines the use throughout the statute. Then you also have Part B, which is assistance for all children with disabilities. So it includes provisions for formula grants that assist states in providing free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment, LRE, for children with disabilities from ages 3 through 21. And then Part C, um, it includes provisions related to grants to assist with early intervention. So if your child went through the Early Steps program, then that would be part of Part C. Then we also have Part D, and it's also related to support for state personnel, technical assistance, and technology, parent training and information centers like us. So that's where we get our funding from. And then again, that technical assistance part to make sure that the states, the schools, the districts are implementing IDEA as it is intended to. So in this presentation, we're gonna focus on Part D, Part C, and Part B, as Part A outlines the general provisions, and it also includes the purpose of IDEA, and it defines used and the definitions used throughout the statute. So here in this slide, we're going to talk about Part D, which is a part of the law that funds this training along with the resources and supports that allow parents of children with disabilities to become their children's best advocates. So that's why I always tell families, the federal government understood how complex IDEA was, that they ensured that there was funding specifically to ensure that parents had training to understand the law. And so that's why it's so important to take advantage of that training, because it is complex. And before I knew about IDEA, I tried my best to learn about IEPs and IDEA, and it's so much information, and a lot of times you get the information and it's not research, it's not vetted, because again, it's a federal law, so it can be interpreted differently, and then every state has, again, we'll talk more about that, but every state has the way how they interpreted it, and maybe they have additional supports in there. So that's why it's so important to take advantage of these trainings, because they are free to parents, and it is written into this law to ensure parents can be their child's best advocate. All right. So here's a definition below to explain what parent training and information centers are. So parent training and information centers must serve parents of children of all ages from birth to 26 and all types of disabilities. And then we receive awards made only to parent organizations as defined by IDA. So the training and information provided by our centers must meet training and information needs of parents of children with disabilities living in areas served by the centers. So for instance, we are Parent Education Network, and we serve the counties, usually Central Florida, Orange County, Osceola County, Polk County. And so again, we have to be serving our different counties where families are, so that way everyone can receive support. And so at least one award for a parenting information center must be made in each state, subject to the receipt of the application. So large and heavy populated states like Florida typically have multiple centers that serve designated counties. So we have 3 parent centers here in Florida, and they're all housed here with our FND. And again, our goal is to ensure that parents have the training that they need to be their child's best advocate. So in this slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about Part C. So infants and toddlers birth through age 2, with disabilities and their family receives early intervention services under IDEA Part C. So here in Florida, like I mentioned, the early intervention program is called Early Steps. Again, many of us that have children with disabilities, we may be familiar with Early Steps because our children usually transfers from Early Steps into the public school system. So the purpose of this part is to provide federal assistance to states. So again, the purpose is to develop and implement statewide early intervention services for infants and toddlers with disabilities and their families. So a lot of times with that program, it has a family focus where when you go into the school system, it is individualized and more focused on the educational needs of the student. The goal is also to facilitate the coordination of these early intervention services and then enhance state capacity to be able to provide quality early intervention services, enhance state and local agencies in order for service providers to identify, evaluate, and meet the needs of children, including historically under represented population. I will talk a little bit more of what child find is, but that kind of covers child find, where we ensuring that when children are being identified as having a disability, and so that they're being evaluated even in under represented population, particularly minority, low income, inner city, rural children, and infants and toddlers in foster care. So again, the goal is to ensure that all children that may have a disability, they are identified and they're receiving the appropriate services and supports. So it also encourages states to expand opportunities for children under 3 years of age who would be at risk of having substantial developmental delays if they did not receive early intervention services. And so, again, for me, with my daughter, she started early intervention, early steps program when she was about 2 years old. She started receiving speech, occupational therapy, and physical therapy at her daycare. So again, they came to her in her natural environment. And we'll talk about LRE. If I don't cover much of LRE, you'll definitely hear it more in the other presentations to come. But LRE, again, is that natural environment where both disabled and non-disabled students are. And so the daycare, again, would be her LRE, because that's where she would receive services from early intervention. In this slide, we're going to talk about special education and related services from ages 3 through 21, which is Part B. So according to the Oxford, ensure, right, means to make certain that something shall occur or be the case. So with that said, IDEA's goal is to make certain that all students with disabilities who have been found eligible can receive special education and related services wherever they receive an education. So what does that mean? So again, IDA defines special education as specially designed instruction at no cost to a parent to meet the unique needs of a child with a disability. IDA also defines this term, related services, means transportation, and such developmental corrective and other supportive services as are required to assist a child with a disability to benefit from special education. So this includes speech and language, audiology services, interpreting services, psychological services, physical and occupational therapy, recreation, including therapeutic recreation, early identification and assessments of disability in children, counseling services. This include rehabilitation counseling, orientation and mobility services, medical services for diagnostic or evaluation purposes. Related services also include health services, school nurse services, social work services in schools, and parent counseling and training. All right, so that said, this is an extensive list, but doesn't necessarily mean every student is going to qualify for all these services or that services are provided based on the diagnosis. So while that's the case, many students do receive a lot of services too. So for example, my daughter is 17. She has an intellectual disability. She is also medically fragile and she's also blind. So she receives orientation and mobility, vision services. She has a one-on-one nurse. Again, there is no limit to it. It's based on a child's need. And at the same time, even though she is blind, she may not have needed orientation and mobility if they, based on the evaluation, that need wasn't identified. But it was, and more than likely it would be with a student that is blind, but again, it's based on these assessments. All right. So therapies provided under special education or related services. They do not replace clinical therapy. So a child may need language therapy to improve their ability to communicate fluently. However, they may not qualify for language therapy as a related service at school if his or her ability to learn and demonstrate his or her knowledge is not impeded or affected by this challenge. So that's why sometimes you may hear a school say that's not educationally relevant, because it may be something that it's not impeding their ability to learn. And so maybe your child may get that service outside privately. All right, so now that we've discussed the most important parts of IDA, let's talk about the six major principles to better understand how our children receive special education once they're found eligible. So we'll start again with a free and appropriate public education. Um, Appropriate evaluation, individualized education plan, and then once we have that plan, where is this going to be implemented? That would be the least restrictive environment. Parent participation, because IDA, they talk heavily about parent participation. Parents, we are a major part of this process. And then procedural safeguards. So again, free and appropriate public education. Please, 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 parents, remember that acronym, FAPE. So enacted in 1975, IDEA, it was known previously as the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. and it mandated the provision of a free and appropriate public education for eligible students aged 3 to 21. So before IDEA, our children were not able to learn um, in with their non-disabled peers. They were not in the school system in this manner. That was the whole intention of IDEA, to ensure that our children were learning, that our children were making gains, that they were learning alongside their peers. And so that's where this came from. That's where the intentions of IDEA came from. So the first mandate, and what does a mandate mean? A mandate means official order or commission to do something. So that said, IDA is a mandate, right? It's an order to provide a free and appropriate public education for eligible students. It is not an invitation, it is not a favor, it is an obligation. Again, FAPE, it's a cornerstone of IDA, and it's the entitlement of each child with a disability to a free and appropriate public education that emphasize special education related services that's designed to meet each child's unique need and to prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. And that came from the Office of Special Education Programs. So again, the information that we're sharing with you is research-based. It is straight from IDEA. It is straight from the Office of Special Education. So let's talk about special education acronyms. So professionals use them all the time, and it's not easy to get used to them as parents because we have so many things, other things like for the educators, this is their realm, right? They're working, this is part of their job. They're hearing this every day. And so for us parents, it doesn't come as natural for us to learn, but it's also important for us to learn it so that we can be in those conversations and we can always request clarification, or you can ask the professionals to limit the use of acronyms, but it's still going to happen. So that's why it's important for us to be able to use them and understand them as well. So so here are the two that are very important. I use them all the time when I'm talking to my child's school. I even use them when I'm talking to my daughter. Again, we talked about IDEA, and then we talked about FAPE, and we talked about LRE, which stands for Least Restrictive Environment. All right. So now in this slide, we're going to talk about the evaluation process to determine eligibility. So the evaluation process is a way to collect information for your child's learning needs, strength, and interests. So the person doing the evaluation, their goal is to try to answer our questions such as, how does your child do well? Or what does your child do well? What does your child know, or what don't they know? What interventions may have been tried? And how did your child respond to that? How does your child learn best? What learning needs does your child have? And does your child have behaviors that will interfere with their ability to learn and to make friends? And then the most important thing is, does your child have a disability? You must give your written permission before your child can be individually evaluated. The school staff will ask you to sign a consent to show that you agree to the evaluation. And then the school will tell you in writing the following: what are the plans for this evaluation, why they think the child should be evaluated, and any other options the school staff considered, and why they did not choose those other options. How can you get help in understanding the consent form and the evaluation process? The school will also give you a copy of this document. So Part B, the notice of the procedural safeguards for parents of children with disabilities. This will explain your right as a parent of a child who has or is suspected of having a disability. And we're going to explore the procedural safeguards in a later slide. What is also important to know about this process is that, again, you're able to request an evaluation as well as a parent. You need to ensure that parents, you have to consent. And then the school has 60 days once written permission for the initial evaluation has been received. Oh, sure, is that right? All right, so here, let's see. Nope, wrong slide. All right. So in Florida, special education is called Exceptional Students Education, ESE. A child qualifies for services only if they meet one of the eligible criterias in the State Board of Education rules for ESE. So here are the different categories that your child may be identified by. And so, again, they can have more than one, uh, they can be more than one program. Um, but the most important thing to know is that, um, this, these programs don't necessarily mean that they're going to be in a specific school, in a specific classroom. This is again based on, in order for your child to qualify for this program, for our ESC program, which is our special education program here in the state of Florida. So in Florida, a child qualifies for autism, ASD, deaf or hard of hearing, ages birth out through 5 years. We also have dual sensory, deaf and blind, emotional behavior disability, gifted, hospital homebound, intellectual disability, IND, language impaired, other health impaired, orthopedic impairments, specific language disability, speech impairment, traumatic brain injury, and then visually impaired, blind, and partially sighted. And again, like I mentioned before, you can qualify for a few, and then they may have one that may be that's the main category. So for instance, my daughter is housed under OHI, but she's also under visually impaired, language impaired. She was hospital homebound at some point. And so again, and she's, even though she does have an intellectual disability, she is not housed under IND because that was something that we agreed on as an IEP team. But again, these are all parts of the IEP process that a team will come together, and based on these evaluation, they may recommend these different programs, and then as a part of the IEP team, will decide what program that child will be housed under. So every child with a disability who is eligible for ESC will have an IEP. An IEP is a written plan that tells you, your child, the teacher, and the other school staff which ESC services the school will provide to your child. Your child cannot receive ESC services until the first IEP is developed and you give permission for the school for the service and placement. IEPs are developed during IEP team meetings, so you'll get written notice from the school before each IEP meeting. The notice will tell you the day, the time, and place suggested for the meeting, who will be there, and why the meeting is being held. The school staff wants to help you, wants your help in writing the IEP, so they will try to find a day and a time and place that is good for you. Some parents choose to participate in the meeting by telephone. If you choose not to participate in the meeting, the school may hold the meeting without you, even if the IEP is a plan for your child only. And so that's why it's so important. If you do have restrictions on times and days, I always recommend parents to send your school staffing specialist, your principal, whoever you're communicating with about the IEP meeting, 3 dates and times that you are available, so that the way they can work around your time. Because again, IDEA does talk a lot about ensuring parents participate, because it's crucial for the success of our children that we participate in this process. There is only one IEP at a time for your child. The IEP will describe the services your child will receive from the beginning date to the ending date of the IEP, which will be for 1 year or less. The new IEP must be written for your child for at least must be written at least once every year. The people you and your school invite to the IEP team meeting should have knowledge or expertise about your child or the technology that your child use. So this could be your next door neighbor, this could be a friend, you could invite a cousin, you can invite anyone you want or you feel would be able to support your child and knows your child and can support you in this process. The school is going to invite someone from an if the school is going to invite someone from an agency other than the school district, you would have to consent to that. They don't have to consent for you inviting anyone, but it would be helpful to let them know. Sometimes if they're meeting in a specific space, they may need extra space. So it's always a good idea to let them know. Sometimes I understand though it might be late in time, but again, that's something that you could do. When you sign the IEP, it does not mean that you agree. Your signature on the IEP means that you attended the IEP team meeting. It does not mean that you give your permission for the services to begin. You will be asked to sign a different form to give your permission for services to begin for your child. If you do not agree with the IEP, you can write not in agreement on the IEP beside your signature. There's also notes that happen during IEP meetings, and that's where you want to express what you don't agree with. There's also a parent concern section in IEP. That's where you want to ensure that whatever concerns you have is written in that section. If you need help, a lot of times we help parents formulate their parent concerns so that way it's clear and so that when they're presenting it to the school, that the school can understand what their concerns are. So the provision of services for students with disabilities in least restrictive environment, which I mentioned a few times, LRE, it's a critical component of IDEA. All right. So what does this mean? Federal requirement. Identical language is found in both the Individuals with Disability Education Act and Section 300.550 of Title 34 of the Code of Federal Regulations. Both of these state the following concerning LRE. To the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities, including children in public or private institutions or other care facilities, are educated with children who are not disabled and special classes, separate schooling, or other removal of children with disabilities from the regular education environment should only occur when their disability, the nature of their disability, is so severe that they cannot be educated in a regular class, even with the use of supplementary aids and services. So it cannot be achieved satisfactory. And what that means is that unless the school has exhausted all options, supplementary aids and services, and then only will you talk about placing a child anywhere outside of the general education classroom. And so that's what LRE means. That's how it's defined in federal law. And we also see if we have the state statute, because we also, again, so we have federal statute and then we have state. And what the goal is for them to align, or the state can even go beyond IDEA. So parent participation, I mentioned how crucial parent participation is. Almost 30 years of research and experience has demonstrated that the education of a child with a disability can be more effective by strengthening the role and the responsibility of parents and ensuring that families have meaning opportunities to participate in the education of their child at school and at home. And because you're the constant member of the IEP team, your child is going to move on from one grade to the next, maybe from one school to the next. definitely when they move on to middle and high school, you're going to be the constant member of the IEP team. So you are very, if not the most important member next to your child of that IEP team. So that's why it's so crucial for us as parents to make sure that we understand IDA, that we fully participate, and that we're implementing, not only supporting the school, supporting our teacher, but implementing at home to ensure that these goals, that this progress is being made holistically. So one of IDA's foundational principle is the right of parents to participate in the educational decisions making in regards to their child with a disability. The law is very specific about what school systems must do to ensure that parents have the opportunity to participate if they so choose. All right, so parents, we have the right to participate in meetings related to evaluation, identification, and educational placement of our child. Parents, we have the right to participate in meetings related to free and appropriate public education. We have, we're entitled to be members of any groups that decides whether our child with a disability meets eligibility requirements for special education and related services. We are entitled to be members of the team that develops, reviews, revises our child's IEP. If neither parent can attend, the school must use other methods to ensure that we receive participation. Sometimes this may be in a conference call, this may be in a parent input form. We are entitled to be members of group that makes decision on placement. So if neither parent can attend these meetings where placement is decided, the school must use other methods to ensure participation. And that again can be a conference call, a video conferencing as well. You are not required to participate. However, that is your choice. What IDEA guarantees, though, that you're given that opportunity to participate. Whether you will participate, how much you participate is up to you as the parent. All right. And here in this slide, we're going to talk a little bit about procedural safeguards. So the most notable procedural safeguards includes the ones that I'm going to talk about. So we have the right as parents to receive a complete explanation of all the procedural safeguards, which is the pamphlet that you should be receiving during your IEP meetings, usually at the end. If you do not understand your procedural safeguards, please, 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 you can reach out to us. We can help you understand. You can also ask your staffing specialist. They're also able to explain your procedural safeguards to you as well. Confidentiality and the right of parents to inspect, to review educational records of their child, the right of parents to participate in meetings, the right to obtain independent education evaluations, IEE. So earlier on, I talked about the school completing evaluations to determine eligibility for programs. If you do not agree with those evaluations completed by your school, by your district, you are able to request an IEE, which is an independent education evaluation at the district's expense. So they'll send you out a list of private evaluators, and you choose a different evaluator to do a private evaluation at that district's expense. The right of parents to receive prior written notice. A prior written notice, again, if any changes are being made to the IEP, if you do not agree with something, as well, the school will write a prior written notice. Again, and that is related to identification, evaluation, and placements, and the provision of FAPE. All right, so we know what FAPE is by now. So the right of parents to give or deny their consent before the school may take certain action with respect to their child. The right of parents to disagree with the decisions made by the school on those issues. And we have the right to use IDA's mechanism for resolving disputes, which includes the right to appeal determination. All right, so that comes to the conclusion of our presentation today. Let me make sure there's no questions. Nope, okay. And so before we end, I do want to go over a little bit more about our programs that we house. So again, we are the Parent Training and Information Center. We have our Pop-In program that serves North Florida. We also have our PSN program that serves Central and Southwest Florida. Our PEN program that we are presenting today with you, it serves Central and Southeast Florida. And then we also have our Family Star program that is funded by the U.S. Department of Health under Health Resources and Services Administration. We also have our Family Star program, and this program will assist families of children and youth with special health care needs to make informed decisions about health care for their children. And then we also have a trust program and a dadvocate program that supports and promotes the involvement of fathers. Here in this slide, you can find us on Instagram, on Facebook, as well as on our website. We have great resources, as well as a lot of the information that I shared today can be found on our website. We have one-pagers that are on specific. So for instance, like LRE, there's a one-pager on that. There's a one-pager on what FAPE is and different acronyms. We even have a one-pager on just acronyms. And so that is some really useful information. And then on this slide, here is our contact information. You can contact us at fnd at fndusa.org. You are also able to call us. We have an 800 number. It's 800-825-5736. And then our direct number is 727-523-1130. All right, and I just want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I hope that this information was helpful. Again, please feel free if you need more individualized support, please give us a call and we are here to help.